Many of you joining us this evening, a combination of existing members and lots of new faces, and you're all very welcome. I do hope that the new speaker programme will encourage you to retain your membership or join us as a new member for the season ahead. It is really important that we continue to keep the club relevant and solvent as well during this period of not being able to hold our physical events. Also welcome to our vice presidents out there and also our corporate members, and just to remind you, they are the RFCA, Savills, Cardiff Met School of Management, Lewis Silkin, Principality Building Society, Evershed Sutherland, Admiral Group, Media Wales, National Museum for Wales, and Thomas Carole. And thank you for all your support. It's much appreciated, particularly in these current times. I'd also like to extend a huge thanks to our long-standing season sponsors. Firstly, Odgers, who I'm sure you're all aware are the blue chip executive search firm with a comprehensive team of consultants, researchers and support staff based here in Wales. And secondly, to Cardiff Metropolitan University, which has been integral to the City of Cardiff since 1865. And they pride themselves on being a strong, sustainable and student-centred university focused on the economic, social and cultural well-being of Cardiff and South East Wales. Now, as I've said, we're going to present a very different format this evening, and we felt it would benefit greatly from some professional presentational input. And we're therefore delighted that Carole Green has agreed to host the majority of this evening's event. Carole will be known to many of you as the work and economy correspondent for ITV Cymru Wales on Wales at 6. She spent 9 years working in TV and radio news programmes for BBC Wales, including producing Good Morning Wales and reporting for Wales Today. She then crossed over to ITV to become the North Wales correspondent, working a home patch, and in recent years is now based in Cardiff with an all Wales brief. Outside of work, Carole is a keen advocate of volunteering and a passionate believer in the power of business for good. So ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to hand over to Carole Green.
Thank you, Scott, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this evening's Cardiff Business Club launch event for the new season. And we'd particularly like to extend a warm welcome to anyone joining us for the first time. Now, just a tiny bit of housekeeping. Obviously, we are in the new world of Zoom, so I'd just like to invite board members at this point to unmute your mics and we can move on. As Scott has said, my name is Carole Green and I'm delighted to be your host for this evening's proceedings. Due to the pandemic restrictions, the club is unable to hold its usual launch format. So in line with recent speaker events, the virtual online theme is continuing for the foreseeable future. But I do know it's going to be a very informative and exciting and enjoyable new season ahead. You've got plenty to look forward to. The board would like to thank members and guests for their continued support during these challenging times. They'd also like to express their gratitude and appreciation to the season's sponsors who are continuing with their support. Cardiff Metropolitan University and Odgers, our thanks to you all. Now, this evening's launch is the perfect opportunity for us to hear from the board members themselves, to get to know them, their backgrounds and involvement within the business community. So I'd like to start by introducing our board members, then asking a number of questions of them to draw on their experiences and expertise just to get the ball rolling. This will then be followed by an opportunity for you to put your own questions to them. And this can be done by sending me a message, and that's using the chat option on your screen. And given that our format tonight is Zoom, it would be helpful if you could keep those questions tight and bright, as we say in journalism, to keep us all interested, and to just highlight in that short message to me on the chat function who you'd like me to address your question to, which member of the board. It may also help you if you can set your screens to speaker view. That will help you see more prominently who is talking at any one particular time. So let's make a start by way of brief introduction, because we've got a breadth and depth of experience on the board here. I'd like to welcome the board members. First of all, Scott Waddington, the club chairman, former CEO of SA Brains & Co, and now chairman of Transport for Wales. I'm sure that's picked up the baton there at a very interesting time, Scott. Thank you for your introduction. Also like to welcome Stuart Price, the club treasurer, also partner of Quantum Advisory, a leading Wales and UK-wide pensions consultancy. Paul Thorburn, who is the club secretary. Paul works in a consultancy capacity for a number of clients across various sectors, and as many of you will know, has a background in professional sport. Kate Bassett, Head of Delivery for Wales at BJSS, the UK's leading privately owned IT and business consultancy. Also like to welcome Catherine Pascoe, the editor of the Western Mail. She's been in post since 2016 after joining the Western Mail as a senior reporter in 2001. And Catherine's also been at the heart of the digital development on Wales Online too. And moving on, John Union, an experienced corporate banking professional. John had a long and varied career with Barclays Bank, holding several senior positions, including head of Wales region corporate banking here. He's now a board member of a local housing association too, so he brings that experience to the board. Benno Wasserstein, a seasoned technology entrepreneur, having founded Box UK in 1998, whilst in his second year at Cardiff University, and since then he's seen it grow to be a multi-million-pound internationally renowned software development company and one of Wales's largest digital specialists. So that's something I'm sure we'll be exploring as we go through tonight's questions. Ross Griffin is a chartered surveyor. Ross is head of Savills Commercial Investment in Cardiff, having joined in 2008. Now there's an auspicious year, isn't it? 2008. We all have memories of that. So welcome, Ross. And Paula Morris, an experienced marketing professional with a portfolio of roles, previously head of marketing at Cardiff-based commercial law firm Darwin Gray. And last but certainly not least, Charlotte Lation is the owner of Lux Family Law, a boutique family law firm. Now, Charlotte was previously head of the family department at Hugh James after joining the firm in 2013. We're also delighted to have the club's president with us this evening, Lord Roe Beddoe, an internationally renowned businessman who was knighted in 2000 for his services to industry and to economic development in Wales. So welcome everyone. I'm sure you'll all agree that that's a very diverse and exciting board with a depth of experience that we're going to hear plenty about as we move through. So on to the questions. There really is only one topic at the moment. We all thought it was, Brexit took all the oxygen out of the room, and then along came the pandemic. So I'd like to start there. It's impacted on all sectors, and I'd like to explore with the board what have been the main issues facing the businesses that you're involved with, and do you anticipate a return to anything like normal soon? And if so, is it a new normal, or will we have long-lasting effects and change how we do business? So if I may start, Stuart, if you would like to just address that question. Are we going back to how it was?
Well, I don't think so, because, just to take a step back, what we've done, we're a corporate pension services company. And for us, a big issue was around will our clients be actually around in the next few months, and also the fact that will they continue paying our bills on time. So as a business, we were very, very mindful of that fact. So what we did was we created a war chest by making sure that we had enough money to see us through this pandemic, and obviously then into the future as well. And we did that really by furloughing non-client staff and non-essential staff, and also obtaining the financial assistance we could get, and then reducing our outgo as well. And what we've now got is we had a war chest in place that's seen us through this critical time. And as a business, we now are working remotely, which we weren't doing before. We've got 130 financial service professionals. We had to get them up, gear them up and working from home. And our IT team did a major job doing that. So IT has been a significant part of our development over the last few months. And I can see that being a bigger part going forward as well from 2020 onwards. And also as a business, one of the things we do, we pay pensions. We pay 15,000 pensions throughout the UK. I had to make sure we carried on doing that as well. So we did all that. But what's going to happen in the future? Well, I think that things won't change this year, and certainly not into the second half of next year. As a business, we've now reopened our office, but obviously only on a very small scale, skeleton staff. Those staff there really that can't work from home. We're meeting virtually. We have meetings every day. Before we were seeing people face to face, but we are getting the signs now that people are asking maybe more for us to actually meet face to face. We're getting a few requests now, so I can see that changing in the foreseeable future. But as a business, though, I think one big thing will be that it's going to be meetings. Meetings are going to be done more online, virtually, with less actually traveling time, seeing people, and that actually I think will be a good thing going forward.
Thank you, Stuart. Ross, have you been turbocharged in a way, changes that were already underway in the businesses you deal with that have just been brought forward by COVID?
Yeah, I think it was always going to happen that we'd all work more from home. Probably thought it'd be another 5 years down the line, and it's certainly been kick-started sooner. I'm still a big believer, though, the office is an incredibly important place to be. Whether you are the employer, the client, whichever side of the business you're on. I think one of the biggest things we're finding at the moment is obviously getting staff back in the office. I think it's important to do so because it brings camaraderie, it brings ideas, it brings work ethic. And you're not going to be back to full amounts of staff in there. We all realise that. But there is a balance, I think, to be struck. We're starting to see other property companies and things starting to go back, but certainly, as Stuart touched on, the bigger pension funds and things like that, they're not going to be hurrying back to the offices until next year. And this remote working, it does work. I think it does work. There's a hugely important place for it. But look, it's an evolving world. But as I said, I still think the office is a very important place to be for staff and meetings and everything else. So yeah, we're big believers, and it still had its place.
Thank you, Ross. And Catherine, your business is all about people and being out in communities, the reporters. So what sense are you getting for those, you've got people that reach deep into Welsh life. What feedback are you getting from your people on the ground? Are you unmuted there, Catherine? I'm not sure we were able to hear that contribution from Catherine at that point, but we're clearly looking at this economic downturn. The numbers aren't good. We're looking at letters really rather than numbers, aren't we? Is it going to be a V and we're going to bounce back quickly? Is it going to be more of a U, or that one we all dread, an L shape, that long bumping along the bottom? So how positive are you that we will return to a vibrant economy, and in what sort of timescales? Benno, I'd like to put that one to you. Are you positive that we will come up quite quickly from where the economy is right now?
I guess we cautiously positive. It does change from day to day. So I can, speak for the digital sector, I guess, more than any other, and the sectors our clients are in. But we've definitely seen a noticeable upturn probably in the last 3-4 weeks. So we saw a relatively decent sized dip, probably at least kind of 10 or 15%, kind of April through to June. And then we saw some pickup. And in the last, probably, as I say, kind of 3 weeks, we've seen a definite pickup in terms of clients starting to kind of bring back their budgets. We've seen inbound activity. Digital is obviously slightly different because, as kind of been mentioned, it's a key factor in the way businesses will work going forward. We've certainly seen an uptick in kind of e-commerce. For some of our clients are big billion-dollar companies, and a lot of them have definitely seen improvements where lockdowns have been kind of closed off. Now that lockdowns, of course, are potentially coming back onto the table, then that's probably the biggest area of concern, and that's why our optimism seems to fluctuate daily.
So that window where we have seen quite positive figures over the last, 4, 6, 8 weeks. Kate, the businesses that you deal with in your consultancy, what sort of feedback are you getting? What picture in terms of bouncing back? Do you share Ross's concerns as well? Around the office not being the focus to the same extent that it was.
Hi. I don't think I share that concern so much, because I think, like Benno, we're in a very similar business, so we are all very used to working remotely. Of course, I miss the side chat that you get in the coffee room or down the corridor where you have the real meeting after the meeting. But I think as a business, we've been able to respond very easily. We have, as an organisation, we work across multiple sectors. And so we've been able to talk to our clients, understand what their thoughts and feelings are. I think you mentioned the V-shaped recovery. I think the sense we're getting from our sort of a CFO type audience is that really we're looking at maybe 2022 before we're kind of back where we were before all of this. I think, like Benno, we're actually busier than ever now. We've actually, as a business, just had, I think, our most successful quarter. And I think that's, technology is a really good industry to be in right now. So I'm very grateful I picked technology and software and digital and e-commerce, because all of those platforms are really coming into their own at this point. So if an organisation wasn't set up to perform in this remote way, they absolutely need to be now. So I think it's going to be a slow recovery. I think as a business, we're feeling positive because of the business we're in, but I've got plenty of friends who have lost their jobs, who don't have that kind of outlook that I do, unfortunately. So I think it's going to be eventually we'll get there, but it's going to take some time.
So a mixed picture depending on the sector. John, from your perspective, and also you do bring that insight into other communities through your role with the Housing Association as well. What are you picking up?
Well, I'm confident that we will see a return to a vibrant economy, but I don't think soon. I think the next couple of months are going to be very crucial. We've seen the announcements this week and the fears of a second spike. So when we've had downturns in the past, things always come back. I think the same as Kate had said, I think it's going to take longer, whether it's mid to next year or the year after. But I think it's down to getting people back into the office, getting people spending, to get the economy moving again. I think we've seen some green shoots there, but the last couple of weeks have seen some pausing going on, and I think it'll be crucial. In housing, we need to look after our tenants and keep them safe. There are some concerns about getting into those properties to look after things like gas, etc. But we have to do that. We have to do it safely, and we are continuing to see houses built by the affordable housing sector. And I've got a role with a building society, and we've last 2 months we've had really big demand for new mortgages, which again is showing that there is pent-up demand out there for the economy as it was previously.
And some confidence to borrow.
Yes, yeah.
And Paula, marketing, one of those sectors that's having a tough time. Do you see things improving? Are you positive at this point?
Well, I think from the point of view of the freelance work that I do, I don't see that picking up anytime soon, because I think a lot of client companies are probably taking care of that in-house at the moment, which is understandable to safeguard employee jobs. But certainly for my employer, I work 4 days a week for Atomis, which is a software developer in procurement software, and we are having our best year ever. So that's really positive. I think that's mainly down to the fact that we've got such a widespread of clients throughout the private and public sector. And actually we won a contract with the NHS and the wider Department of Health and Social Care a few months before the pandemic. So the work that they've needed from us has actually outstripped the initial scope. So that's been very fortunate that we've actually played a role in helping the NHS to respond to this awful situation. So yeah, I think from the point of view of my main role, things are looking pretty good actually, which is a relief.
Good to hear. Now, Paul, used to pivoting in a sporting sense, very important for businesses at this point, having to think on their feet and adapt. Always the case with successful businesses, never standing still, but that's more important than ever, surely.
Absolutely. I think the challenge with the current situation is that every day something else gets thrown into the mix. So from a business planning perspective, it is very difficult. But echoing some of the observations of my colleagues, I think it very much depends on which sector you're actually operating in. One of my clients is in the telecoms business, and never have they been busier. Clearly, with people having to move out of the office environment to the workplace, ensuring that connectivity is there to keep the businesses going has given them probably one of their best ever years. But it does vary. If I can put my sporting hat on for a moment, because sport is a business, it is an industry, and it's also a lifeblood of communities. The real challenge I think we're facing in Wales in particular is that our community sports are very reliant on the national governing bodies to help drive income. And if you look at the rugby scenario, the fear is that obviously we're not going to have international rugby matches in the autumn, and there is a real concern, I would say, about the Six Nations. So from a Welsh Rugby Union perspective, the funding that they get really does drive the funding streams for 300 odd community clubs. And without funding, those community clubs, I suspect many of them will actually fall by the wayside. And I think that is going to have a much longer damaging impact on our community. So that would be a concern from that perspective. But yeah, it's challenges across the board.
Not something we particularly want to consider, is it, or think about. And on that community note, I'd like to bring you back in, Catherine, if I may. I hope we can hear you. Communities, your reporters, your business is all about people. What sort of feedback are you getting? You've got your roots across Wales. What sense do you get of, is there confidence out there that we're resilient and we will sort of bounce back better in Wales? Well, I think that seems to have fallen. Not quite sure what's happened with Catherine's setup there, but perhaps Scott, may I just address that to you? That you've been in businesses and Transport for Wales, obviously now serving the whole of Wales. Do you get a sense that there's a confidence out there? Lots of anecdotal reports, business down on the trains, getting people confident to go back into work, back in using public transport and into the office.
Yeah, I think confidence is actually a really important word, particularly with people using various services. If you go back to my old industry, hospitality, from what I can tell, I think most businesses have been trading at about 70 to 80% of what they were trading at before COVID, which probably is a little better than was expected. But since the recent announcement of only 6 in any household, etc., I know the bookings have gone down, and that's purely a confidence thing. It doesn't actually change why people go to the pub. In terms of transport, it has been very, very slowly coming back. When COVID hit, we were down to less than 10% of usage compared to what we would normally expect, and it's gradually been creeping up towards maybe 30 now, but we're again not expecting that to radically change over time. And coming back to the point about confidence, for me, I think a lot of people thought towards the sort of back end of this year things will change, and clearly they're not. And until we get some form of clear solution to the threat of COVID, I think we are going to find ourselves pretty much in the same situation. And that is obviously affecting different industries, as Paul said. It is very much down to what industry is happening. But certainly from a Transport for Wales point of view, we are expecting for the foreseeable future that fewer people will continue to use the transport network, which brings its own challenges. It's a very expensive thing to run. It's something that the Welsh Government want to maintain, particularly for key workers, but also for the service to be there to enable those that want and can go back to work to be able to get to work. And therefore we're continuing to plan all the significant investments, as an example, Metro. We have acquired the core values lines from Network Rail in order to put Metro onto it. And Welsh Government have been very clear that we want to continue with that investment. And we were looking at other schemes around Wales as well, which clearly will benefit those particular communities.
Good to hear those plans still on track then at this point. Now, just earlier in the year, at the start of the pandemic, we hosted Frank Holmes, chairman of Cardiff Capital Region, and he referenced a survey of local businesses where many highlighted changes to working practices and the workplace itself. Now, I'd just like to draw out your thoughts on the way businesses will operate moving forward. And if I could ask you, Ross, to address that one, because obviously we've heard from Welsh Government in the last 24 hours that they're looking at this figure of 30%, working from home, and the idea of local hubs and collaborative working. How does that sit with how things have traditionally operated?
I think collaborative working's been, again, it's been an evolving scenario in the last 3 to 5 years anyway. And as we know in Cardiff now, there's numerous places that offer that type of scenario, as well as serviced offices. Again, I think, if you are some of the big firms in Cardiff, not to name any names, but if you go to like the likes of Central Square, where BBC and people like that are, some of those businesses have obviously taken significant space in the last few years. Would they be doing that now? No, they probably wouldn't. Will some of those businesses perhaps sublet some of that space? Yeah, they may well do. But again, I think as things will evolve, people will be heading back into their offices. Again, if you're a business, you might not now take 50,000 square foot, but you might take 20,000 square foot. So instead of these new buildings being let to 2, 3, maybe 4 occupiers, they're probably let to 6 to 8 occupiers. But as I said, there's still that place for them, and they are needed. I think collaborative space, yes, it is of interest, but again, I think it very much depends on the line of businesses you're in. Speaking from ourselves, I think John touched on this. Our residential side of the business are absolutely booming at present, and since the sort of ending of some of the lockdown issues, our resi team don't have hours in the day, quite frankly. So they still need that space. And then you look at our management business, very similar, because we obviously manage all the assets for the clients, so still that's booming. So certain parts, yes, it is quieter, but do we still need that space? Yes, we do. Will, in the short term, as I said, there's abilities to sublet space, not necessarily give up space. If you are a major occupier, would you be signing a new big lease at the moment to take more space? You might stay where you are, maybe. But again, I think that's a short to medium term. I don't think you shouldn't be negative about it. And I think, as I said, there's going to be ways businesses will evolve that scenario. But in the short term, yes, it will be quieter, but it's certainly not dead.
Good to hear. And Benno, Ross there talking very much about physical space, but if we turn to you for that digital picture.
So I think we can operate, as Kate said, the industry we're in, we can operate fully remote, and we could do it forever. I agree with Ross that the office for us, there's that stuff you just can't get remotely. We've got a nice office opposite the stadium. We recently refurbished it, perfect timing. We would love to make the most of it. And what you mentioned, that article that came out in the press in terms of Welsh Government's kind of aims about, there's kind of these hubs and 30% remotes and stuff. And that's kind of what we're thinking, do we turn our office into more of a hub? So we still get the best of both worlds. The biggest challenge for a lot of our employees is the transport challenge, which is that some of them might live in areas where, that it was tough to get to work anyway. And now that they're, reduced services, it might be even tougher. And then there's obviously the concern about, the kind of the practicality of it and the safety of it. So I think we definitely are going to be taking a kind of, it's still remote, but when we can. So we've got a few people working back into the office at the moment, just as kind of skeleton staff. We do, however, have at least 10% of people who said they would probably like to formalize a kind of fully remote work life, which is great. And we as a business, we've got to support them, because if we don't support them, all they're going to do is they're going to go to a competitor who offers them 100% remote. So I think we've got to be quite realistic that while some of us may love office-based activity, there are others who actually think, you know what, working from home is fantastic. So I think we're just going to have to adapt. But personally, I kind of go into the best of that hybrid camp where you have some in the office, some remote, and you get together as often and as practical as you can.
So very much a mixed economy in terms of that balance between home hubs and offices. Now, much has been made, if we look outwards from Wales now, of the need and opportunity for the UK to become more self-sufficient and less reliant on imports, and that's been highlighted over the last few months, particularly in the light of the PPE crisis, where I must say I've been privileged to see and go inside some of the Welsh firms that have adapted and turned on a sixpence to alter their production to what's needed in the here and now in terms of PPE, in that crisis point of the pandemic. So there are positive outcomes. What are they? And do you see from the pandemic the changes, the way we do business and the way we live? Should we be looking more to ourselves to be more self-sufficient and look at what we've got here? That has it focused us inwards in a way? I'd like to put that probably to all the board in turn. So may I start? If we go to Kate, please.
So I guess I am an eternal optimist. So despite how difficult it is, and I appreciate it's easy to say that when actually from my career perspective, work is great for me right now, but I'm very aware of colleagues and friends who are not in such a good position. I think if history teaches us anything, it's that actually often the best things come out of these times of adversity. Some brilliant inventions, some things that we are not even on our radar right now will come out of this. So I believe you always have to look for the opportunities. But I think the main thing is that all companies have to adapt. So whatever your business model, I mean, we are very well set up for remote working. So we were able to move quite quickly, but that wasn't the case for a lot of our clients. So we had to work really closely with them to sort of support them on that journey. I think we've already talked about office space and what that means for the future. I think for my business, it actually gives us a great opportunity because geography and location of the individual is no longer a concern. So we have offices in America and in Europe. We've got people sitting in Cardiff working for clients on Wall Street in New York, and people in Portugal working for clients in Bristol. So we've been able to distribute the work based on the skills of the individual, not the physical location, which is great actually, because it gives a lot more opportunity for those individuals to develop their skill set and have some really good experience. So I think, it is tough right now, and it will be tough for a little while longer, but I think if we can try and look for those glimmers of positivity, then I think we will find actually, hopefully we'll come out of this a better, stronger people, I guess.
And Paula, is that something that in your field that you can look further afield for opportunities because you can do your job or most aspects of your job, from anywhere, and the technology's been there, but now we're just using it to the full?
Yeah, absolutely. I think from a marketing point of view, employers can look to recruit people from anywhere now, really. They don't need to offer them relocation packages. People don't need to think about moving to big cities if they prefer a more rural existence. And I just think that it's going to make the talent pool a lot wider and more accessible, which is a good thing. But I think the other thing, I agree with Kate, that opportunities come out of adversity. And I think it has been really good to see how some of the manufacturing skills within Wales have been utilised and adapted to help with equipment and materials that have been needed in the pandemic. And I think that's been a really positive thing as well. I think for us to be a little bit more self-sufficient is a good thing, although I also believe in us, being very much part of a global community. And I wouldn't want to see us cut off either. So I think it's a real strength to develop Indigenous capabilities, but also to keep a worldview of things.
Thank you. And you touched there on doing jobs from anywhere. Is that an opportunity? We've seen lots of discussion around local high streets, perhaps benefiting at this point, having a fillip where, the city centres perhaps feeling the draft a little bit more from that lack of footfall. John, is that something that you see coming through with your two hats on, both banking and housing association?
I was just going to bring another example what I've seen recently of the NHS. I have a role working with Cardiff and Vale, and people on the call today might know about CAV24, and COVID-19 has forced the need how people can interact and meet and go about their daily business. And with running a hospital with COVID and non-COVID, is forced to look at new ways of operating. So people now have to make an appointment, basically, if they need to go to A&E, take a call, have a triage, and then have an appointment. So hopefully not long waiting times at the A&E is avoided. Also, and I've used this recently, e-consult. You can now go online, type in a few details, and interact with your local doctor and or with the hospital if you're having a follow-up. So they've come along much more quickly as a positive, I guess, out of COVID-19. They'll probably take a lot longer had that not happened.
And Paul Thurban, just you're speaking there about the grassroots earlier of rugby, and it sounded a pretty bleak picture, but are there positives when you look out that this pandemic will bring forward, in your view?
I think my colleagues have touched upon some of the positives that have come from this in terms of PPE and local manufacturing. And indeed, I had a discussion last week with a government representative who's been instrumental in driving the local supply chain. And I think that has demonstrated a resilience in the face of adversity of Welsh businesses and how we can adapt. And I think we have to really capitalise on that. And I think touching on the point about becoming a little bit more self-sufficient, personally, I do feel this is an ideal opportunity for us to look at that in much more broader basis across all sectors. And a lot of that will be driven obviously by Welsh public sector procurement strategy. And I really do feel that we need to actually engage local business a lot closer than we perhaps are doing. Whilst respecting the fact that we want to look at a global economy opportunity for everybody.
Thank you. Stuart, is that part of the solution, that circular foundational economy where we live, work local and bolster the local economy? Is that something that you see lasting? It's certainly having a moment, but is it something that's really going to bed in as hopefully we move through the pandemic and beyond it?
I think so. You hear about, obviously the city centre's not doing so well, but then the local high street's doing very well. I know myself personally now, I shop a lot more locally now, just go up the road and support those local businesses. So I think the pandemic's going to do well for local businesses, I think, in Wales and throughout the UK. And maybe some of the bigger businesses will have to take maybe a look at their business model and actually see how they're going to react to that. But I know ourselves personally, though, from our firm, the pandemic has given us an opportunity. We've been growing year on year on year, and we haven't had a chance to sort of step back and look at our business model. And this has given us a chance now to do that. We can now actually see areas maybe where we've been over-resourced and under-resourced. And it's given a chance really to maybe get back on track now as well. So I'm sure other businesses are like ours as well, where they've got to reassess, and maybe they're now in a good place to move forward after the pandemic finishes.
So a chance, albeit forced upon us, to reset, and obviously lots of businesses resizing, and some positives out of that, but also some pain for some of our big employers as well. But not at all surprised to hear from the board there. Lots of confidence, lots of positive examples. I think it does give us all room for hope. So I thank you very much for those initial thoughts. But I think it's perhaps time now to draw on the questions from the floor, as it were. And thank you. Some have come in already, and it's a good point in the evening to give you a gentle reminder that just use that chat option to send in your question for one particular board member. That would be helpful. Keep those questions short, because I'm juggling a couple of screens here. You can help me out, and I will take a look at those now. So first of all, this one has come in from Alan Michael, and Alan says there's been some discussion lately about whether the new challenges we face in Wales should lead to the Welsh Development Agency being brought back into existence. Some positive comments, but some rude ones. And I just wondered Alan, you haven't said there who you would like to hear from, but Scott, we all remember the Welsh Development Agency. It's been, it certainly punched above its weight at the time, but is that the way forward in your view now?
I thought you might ask me that one. I don't see it, and the reality is I don't see it coming back. But as you say, there were a number of aspects of what it did that clearly was really helpful for Wales. And I think my sense right now is a bit like Stuart just said. When you have a crisis like this, I think it makes you really look at yourself in terms of what you're doing now and what you can do moving forward, and adapting. And I think that goes for Wales. I think Wales potentially has a real opportunity. It's a very attractive place to come and live and work, and we've heard from Kate and others that people can now work in a variety of different places, and I think if Wales can put itself out there to really help draw in a variety of businesses and individuals actually to come and work and base themselves here. And actually I thought it was quite brave of the Welsh Government to come out quite early and suggest that fewer people might be working in offices and supporting the kind of future of hubs. I think is really important. And then from my point of view, making sure that then, obviously with the bias to transport, but we have the infrastructure that sits across that will enable people to move from A to B far more effectively and without the use of cars and so forth. So for me, and this government had an agenda for redistribution of wealth, and I think actually the current circumstances allow that to happen. But to answer your question, I don't see it being through the WDA, but I think a cohesive strategy that still can be developed within Welsh Government could work very well.
Perhaps another evening we can discuss whether there is one there. I think we've perhaps not got the time this evening, but a question has come in from Melanie Hamer, and this is for you, Ross. Are you seeing a big downturn in the need for office premises and hence landlords being adversely affected by working from home? And obviously those are some of the issues we've touched on, but are you seeing that downturn? I think you had a more positive outlook.
Hi, Mel. I think at the moment, as I said, actually what we're seeing at the moment in a positive regard is Cardiff is seeing more of its sort of bread and butter lettings. Cardiff typically has a lot more lettings of 1,000 to 5,000 square foot in the office market. And it's only been really in the last 4 to 5 years where, as I said, we've had the big occupiers moving around the city and some new ones coming in, to the likes of Central Square and areas like that. As I said, I don't see that changing. Yes, it'll be slowing down and some of those occupiers might take a smaller amount of space and a larger amount of space. But actually, in the moment when those big lettings aren't happening, the smaller ones, which is, as I said, our typical market, it's actually quite busy. Your question, the other part of the question on landlords having a big knock-on effect. Well, pension funds, arguably not at present, because that's obviously all down to quarterly and monthly valuations. And where we're lucky in Cardiff, actually, if you look at us against the other big regional cities, we're a very low rents for prime office space compared to others. And we've got a shortage of, well, I want to say a shortage, we've got very little available decent grade A space. So at present, it's probably holding up okay. And I think stuff in the city centre will hold up quite well. I actually think we might start seeing as well a bit of a renaissance in business parks, because people, as we all said earlier in touch on transport, some people now might be using the car a bit more regularly to go to work rather than public transport. And certainly, especially in the public sector, they might want more space. So they will keep, again, we touched on hubs, and they might have these hubs dotted around as opposed to everyone being in one large building. So at the moment, it's actually holding up quite well. But, take-up is down a bit, but that's more just because, there hasn't been a lot going on for the last 6 months. But sentiment, it's holding up pretty well.
Thank you, Ross. And this one is from David Ainsworth, and it's on that theme of hubs again, which obviously a theme coming through. Do you think the increased acceptability regarding remote working might lead to more opportunities for remote employee hubs in Wales to drive low-cost options for firms not currently based in Wales? So basically, I think the question there is about leveraging that low cost in Wales compared to higher cost regions of the UK, like London. And I think that's probably one for Kate.
I think the answer is yes. I think we're already seeing it. So, I mean, I spent most of my career in London. I only moved back to Wales about 5 years ago. And I think the job I have now, I actually never thought I would have this opportunity. I still used to travel a lot until very recently. But now, from an IT perspective, the world has turned on its head completely. I could be based anywhere pretty much and do my job now. Now, that's not to say I'd miss out on maybe the client face-to-face interactions, which at the moment are kind of still on hold. So I think it was Benno or Ross, someone said they're starting to bring staff back into the office. We have got some people who want to go back to the office. Equally, we've got others who do not. So we're being very, very cautious, and their well-being is at the heart of all the decisions we have. But I think absolutely, I think right now it's going to be interesting to see what this does to salaries, though, because in London or the bigger cities, you could always command a higher salary. If you could sit in Llanelli doing a job that you would normally be sitting in the centre of London City doing, what's that going to do to salaries? Because, you know, that kind of London waiting type argument is sort of may disappear. But again, it depends on the longer term view and how long we're going to be in this landscape, I think.
Thank you for that, Kate. Well, there's a question here from Bethan Darwin of Thomson Darwin. Bethan says she gets a lot of work referred from London and South East based employers and individuals, and they come via word of mouth recommendations. And the main driver being willing to take a chance on a firm in Wales is, you know, the personal recommendation. And it will be good, you know, London lawyers, but probably more importantly, a third or more on price. It's quite long, this one. So will we be up or down, I think is the sense, with more remote working across England and Wales? So that personal recommendations that come in from the South East and London, you know, if we're working remotely, are we going to lose out there, or do we not see that too much of a problem? Stuart, would you like to address that, please?
Yeah, thanks, Carole. I suppose it's a difficult one, because I suppose at the moment you've got a lot of, I suppose, the London firms. They still, I think, as Kate mentioned, it's still being based in London. So I think maybe over time the opportunity of maybe, you know, firms using businesses in Wales for maybe a good service, but for maybe a lower price, will hold out. But then over time, then maybe if there's still more and more remote working, then maybe, as Kate mentioned, salaries will come down, and that will put us more in an even playing field. So it's a really hard one to say what's going to happen. I think at the moment Wales is still obviously got that opportunity, but maybe in the longer term that will die down.
And Ross, what do you make of that? Do you think we'll be up or down? You know, given a lot of work, you know, comes through personal recommendations. Bethan saying from the South East that people willing to take a chance on Wales, but obviously price comes into that as well.
I think from our perspective, we get a lot of work from London anyway, because if you're a pension fund and things like that, you want to get the best advice. If that pension fund owns, for example, something in Wales and South Wales specifically, they're going to would be coming to the local advisors to provide that advice. So from our perspective, it's not so much for a cost thing. I think, just touch on again, you know, the cost of offices and things like that. Again, we are significantly cheaper than the rest of the UK and other big cities now. So from that perspective, we're cheaper anyway. But no, I still think, you know, they want the best advice, and your best advice would be from your local advisors and local knowledge.
Thank you, Ross. So price competitive advantage there for us. There's a question come in from Rosie Moriarty-Simmons. Welcome, Rosie. Rosie says, home working might give some disabled people more opportunities, sort of a levelling of the playing field for disabled workers, who we do know from all research, you know, have to live with higher levels of unemployment and underemployment than many disabled workers would like. Paula, do you think this gives an opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a real positive byproduct, you know, without having to face a long commute, or, you know, some buildings not being as accessible as they could be, particularly more old-fashioned ones. Then there will be fewer barriers, and that's definitely a good thing. So yeah, that's something that I think we can look forward to.
And John, would you like to address that as well? Do you think it will create more opportunity for groups that perhaps have had more exclusion than inclusion in the workplace?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with just being said. I think the more we move to digital, the barriers that in front of people, the buildings, etc., that should create opportunities. And we learn from what we have to do now with COVID-19, and hopefully, as digitality improves, that should give more opportunities to people those challenges. Absolutely.
And we've just had a comment back here on our previous question, Beth Ann Darwin's question. This is Melanie Hamer, and basically she's just a point of information that she agrees with Beth Ann that a lot of her clients are from outside of South Wales and they're used to not having face-to-face meetings. So local clients like the video meetings, and it saves time. It saves travelling time, the parking expenses and the general inconvenience. So a positive there from Melanie that, in South East, perhaps, people further down the road with remote working, and, something that will stick with us going forward. And she agrees with Beth Ann there. And I just... a question of my own, actually. I think I'd just like to put it to Kate. There's a lot of talk about what will a future workplace look like, a future Wales, that big picture. If you could just describe it in a couple of sentences, what do you think we will come out of this pandemic with? Is it time to reset? That, the good things we want to take forward from pre-COVID and the vision of a new way of working?
So let's think. I think it will be a different Wales. It can't not be, because everything has changed. We can't go back to the way it was, whether that's how we work, how we live. People want to live in a house with a garden where they don't currently have one, so they want to move house. They want to have the option to work from home or go in for a couple of days a week, so they'll do that. They want to shop in a different way. They want to socialise in a different way. I think it's impossible we could ever be the country we were before. My personal view, having been brought up in Wales and then gone off to London for quite some time and come back, is I still feel as a nation we lack confidence massively. Just got to look at rugby. England walk on the pitch and then Wales walk on the pitch. The difference in the confidence levels, I think, is just staggering. But I think we've just got to back ourselves. We're a very small nation that has a lot going for it. I think we just have to gather together now and work through this together and see what comes out the other side.
Thank you, Kate. And another question, you talk about backing ourselves there, but I just want to bring in the idea, obviously there's been unprecedented levels of government supporting jobs from both UK and Welsh government. To what extent is it about, the picking winners now, that government's having to pick which sectors to back and to pick the winners? And there's some hard decisions in the months ahead, particularly as we see the furlough scheme coming to a close in October. I'd like to just address that to Paula.
With the furlough scheme coming to an end, yeah, I mean, that's when we're all going to... Sorry, I wasn't sure if I was muted or not then. I guess that's when we're really going to see the impact of, redundancies, because a lot of that will have been delayed. But I think also in the next couple of months, hopefully we'll also see more job opportunities being created. I know some big employers have already created many thousands of jobs in the last few weeks. So hopefully we'll see more of that. And hopefully we'll see more small independent businesses grow in and taking on obviously smaller numbers of staff, but it'll all be incrementally important. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be a nervous few months as we see how things establish themselves in our new normal, as everyone's calling it. And of course, all of it very much depends on the rising or not numbers of infections and hospitalisation. So I'm cautiously optimistic that because this downturn has been caused by very different reasons and the economy was shut down so abruptly for good reasons, when it reopens, I'm hoping that we will see things in certain sectors at least come back a lot quicker than they have in previous recessions. Maybe that's the optimist in me, but I really hope that that will certainly come true for a lot of job creation and a lot of sectors we have here in Wales and the UK.
Paula, talking there about job creation, and obviously we've seen some, big numbers, job creations. We think of Amazon, but if we look at retail, where it's shifting from the physical structures and space to the digital platforms, and that's creating jobs in logistics. And there's a gender, very interested in that gender balance there. It tends to be the women who work on the high street, and it tends to be men who work in the logistics side of things. There is a question here from Terry, who is looking at this gender gap, and whether we've got a gender gap, and that COVID is accentuating that. And I think it's a very long question. I haven't got time to read it all here now, but I think his point is, to what extent do employers have to move quickly to get the talent, that those to be flexible, to attract people in, that the norm now will be that people do want to work, perhaps particularly women, because they're the ones that often share a little more of the other responsibilities to work from home. Will employers adapt quickly enough? Paul, may I ask that one of you?
I see no reason why they won't, and I think whilst we've been talking about some of the negative aspects of this pandemic, the positives are that there should be more inclusivity, and the marketplace should open up for us all in terms of who we provide services to and where. So I would be very optimistic about the future. Going back to sort of an earlier discussion, I think one of the things we mustn't forget is that actually people do business with people, and it's a fine balance between having this remote virtual engagement with people, but actually relationships are developed through the bonding, and such as the Cardiff Business Club. I'm not too sure if in 5 years' time we were still running these virtual meetings, we would have a business club that we know it has been, and the success that it has, because people like to meet people, and that's how you develop business opportunities. And I think that format still needs to be there somehow, whilst acknowledging the fact that technology does provide an alternative means of doing business as well. So I think it's a fine balance.
And Stuart, your thoughts on that? A mix, so the flexibility that technology gives us, in a way, knows no bounds now.
I totally, because as part of my role within the business, it's new. I still work on the new business side as well, and that really has dried up over COVID-19. It's been the regular work, it's been there, but new opportunities has dried up, and as Paul mentioned, you can do things over Zoom or Teams, whatever, and that's fine. It works okay, but I still think there's that need for that face-to-face, that personal touch, really meeting someone, getting to know them. And again, with the club, the good thing about the club is, the network, meeting individual people, chatting to people, meeting new people. In the virtual world, you can do it a bit, but it's not the same. So I can see, the virtual will help in relation to keeping down costs and travel time, give you opportunities to do other things, but you still need that face-to-face. We're human beings, you need that personal touch, that contact, really. And I think that's going to come back, I think, bigger and bigger and bigger compared to where we currently are.
Thank you. And there's a question here from Colin Arnold. He said to everybody, I'm not sure we've got time to put it to everybody, but Scott, perhaps if you could pick this one up. Does the committee see that we might have a recovery called a K-shaped? Some sectors recovering, but others still struggling. I think we're already seeing that, aren't we? And if so, what sectors will prosper and which will not? So it's that point of, governments picking winners. Colin mentions the culture industry here, 59 million awarded to Wales for additional arts funding as part of 1.57 billion handed out by the UK government. And, will that money come through quickly enough? So, obviously Colin has spoken about creative industries there, but of course support coming through quickly enough. Scott, to be fair, I think most people would agree that businesses have been helped in a very timely fashion over the last 4 months.
Yes, they have, and I think as Paul had said earlier, the big challenge is about to be upon us, and I don't think we've got the time now to go through all of the sectors. Clearly there are going to be winners and losers, but the key, I think, will be how quickly business can adapt to where the new opportunities are, and people who maybe find themselves in the wrong sector, in inverted commas, are willing to also change direction, learn new skills, and to develop themselves in a different way. Because we've looked at the digital economy. There are certain forms of retailing that are clearly strong, but there are other sectors where it is incredibly difficult. You mentioned culture and the arts. I can't see that coming back anytime soon. Same with pool and sport. Sadly, I don't see crowds coming back, which has a big impact on revenue for various sports clubs, etc. Hospitality is another one. There will be winners and those that are really good at what they do, and there will be a shakeout there. But I don't think that sector is going to be able to employ the people it has done. So I think government support and targeted support is going to be really, really important. I just hope that they do support those things like culture that I think have got a long wait, and it's not their fault. But I'm sure we would all want a vibrant, art sector to come back anytime soon.
And certainly important to the Cardiff economy. Well, lots of positivity and confidence from the panel and board members, as we would expect. We're running out of time, so it's my job really to hand to Scott now and just to point forward to the season ahead and the names we can expect to point us in the right direction and steer us through what's very likely to be a bumpy few months. But thank you so much for your questions. I think we got through most of them, and I hope the panel gave you what you were looking for. They were certainly insightful answers from sitting here. So Scott, may I just hand to you? Thank you.
Well, thanks, Carole, and you've certainly made my evening a whole lot easier by managing that debate, but more importantly, it produced a really interesting discussion, I think. So thank you so much for giving us your time this evening. So as Carole said, that just really leaves it for me to sort of go through and give you a sense of the speakers that we have. I think a number of them are topical in terms of current times. So all of the details, by the way, are available on our website. But our first event is on October the 19th, when we'll hear from Sir Wyn Williams, who's a former QC and judge. He's president of Welsh Tribunals and now a leading international sports arbitrator and mediator, and also who has a long association with the Welsh Rugby Union. Then on Tuesday the 24th of November, we will hear from Catherine Bennett, CBE, who is Senior Vice President at Airbus UK. She leads the company's external engagement and strategy in the UK and reports directly to the global CEO. In July 2018, she founded and co-chairs the UK's Women in Aviation and Aerospace Charter, which is committed to building a fair and balanced industry for women. In December, we do actually plan to have an event. We don't normally do so, but given that I think there'll be a lack of pre-Christmas events, unfortunately, we are looking to get a speaker, so there'll be more on that hopefully shortly. Then we move into 2021. On Monday, the 18th of January, Neil Johnson, who's chairman of Quintech, a major defence company. He's also, for the last 7 years, been a senior independent director of the Business Growth Fund. And he's also a former Director General of the Engineering Employers Federation. And one of his many exec roles was as Chief Executive of the RAC. Then moving into February, on the 22nd, we have Rob Linley, who is Managing Director of Mitsubishi UK Limited, who, by the way, have announced their withdrawal from the UK market. So it'll be interesting to hear what Rob has to say. And he's also worked with Harley Davidson and the McLaren Group. In March, we will have our annual visitor from the Reserve Forces, but the exact speaker and date are to be confirmed. Then on Tuesday, the 20th of April, we have Amanda Blanc, who is Chief Executive of Aviva Insurance. She was previously Chief Executive EMA and Global Banking at Zurich and CEO of AXA UK PPP in Ireland. She is also the first woman to chair the Association of British Insurers and is a past president of the Chartered Insurance Institute. And she holds a number of non-executive roles, including chair of the Welsh Professional Rugby Board. Then on Monday, the 17th of May, Sir Chris Evans, who I know most of you will be aware of, one of Europe's leading scientific and biotechnology entrepreneurs, will speak to us. He was born in Port Talbot and has spent his working life really turning into his scientific discoveries into new practical medical treatments and therapies, and his products have impacted the lives of millions of people over the years. Then on the 14th of June, we have Cole Needham, who's founder and chief executive of IMDb, the #1 movie website in the world. The business was incorporated in 1996 with volunteers as shareholders, and it became a wholly owned subsidiary of Amazon in 1998. And Cole's based in Bristol, from where he still runs his company. And then in early July, Andrew Davis, who is Chief Executive of Kia Group, will address us. He's a former Chief Executive of Waits Group and a long-time server with BAE Systems. So that's the run through. We may have an ambassadorial lunch depending on circumstances, and other events will also be publicised on our website once they are confirmed. And this is also where you can learn more about the club and its events, make your bookings, and become a member if you have not yet joined us. So I hope that you agree with me that we have another very strong lineup for this season, and my thanks must go to Paul Thorburn for working so hard to pull this list together. The new programme will continue to be online events, obviously, for the foreseeable future. Bookings are open for the October and November events right now, and we will let you know when you can book from January onwards. We are keen to talk to any organisations about corporate sponsorship opportunities, and whilst we are hopeful to return to some form of normality in the new year, and we'll be looking for obviously our normal event sponsors, given that we are currently hosting these virtual online events, we have created a sponsorship package for these events, and if any organisations are interested, they should contact either Paul Thorburn or Liz Brooks for more details. I would just like to take the opportunity to thank Liz for all that she does in managing the club and organising these events so professionally for us. So just to finish, I'd like to thank all my bold colleagues for their input this evening, but also across the whole of the year. They are really very supportive and work very hard for the club. Thank you again to Carole and to all of you for joining us this evening. I'm so sorry that we're not able to now sort of go and have a good chat together over something, a glass of something cold, but we really do look forward to welcoming you again next month. Thank you very much and good evening.